Hey guys, hey Rahul, so what's up?
Hi Apurva, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good too. So guys, we have come up with this video where I and Rahul have paired up and we have done a course from Test Automation University. So Rahul, tell us more about this course.
Before I talk about the course, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about Test Automation University, from where I have been doing courses from last 1 or 1.5 year now. And it has all these amazing courses on test automation and learning about automation from all these amazing instructors. And there are different learning paths that are available here for UI, API automation, mobile, codeless, and even for different language bindings. So it's something really cool, and I mean, which has helped me to learn a lot about automation. And the amazing part is that all this is for free, so it's so awesome. And I and Apurva, we both paired up for this course on the whole team approach to continuous testing by Elizabeth Hoke. So, Apurva, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, guys, this is an amazing website and learning with Rahul, pairing and learning up with Rahul was super fun. So please check out the link for Test Automation University in the description box.
Yeah. So this was even my first pairing exercise, formal pairing exercise, where I was like, we both had targets for completing this course, and we both were making notes. And I have some notes which we can use today to drive through this entire chapter by chapter what we learned. So there were 7 chapters, and I wanted to talk about this first chapter that was on continuous testing, and what this continuous testing is actually all about, before going into this whole team approach and other ways of achieving this continuous testing. So this course talks about like a definition of continuous testing, and there are different and multiple definitions of continuous testing. So there is no one single way or accepted definition for continuous testing. There are multiple. For example, Wikipedia gives a very generic uh, definition of continuous testing related to process and pipeline and some immediate feed, like, so that we can give immediate feedback on the business risks. And there were different uh, definitions from software testers also. One was given by Bass, which was on like giving the or checking the business risks associated with delivering a application over a CI/CD approach. So that's something which even I used to think, and then there were different definitions which I got to know, like uh, which was given by Dave. Like, testing is a cross-functional activity that involves the whole team and should be done continuously from the beginning of the project. So this is like helped me to understand that this is not just the role for the testers or the testing team, but it's essentially about the whole team and how they look at it as a tester. So and the quality as a whole team approach. So that was something nice. And there was this this flow diagram with Dan. Let me just zoom into it a bit. So it essentially talks about all the stages through which this software product goes on, and the different areas and points where we need to test. And essentially, if you see, like, we test at each and every single point, and that's the essence of continuous testing. So this is something which I loved about continuous testing, that testing at each phase, so that you give in I mean, the faster feedbacks, or essentially more confidence. And like, you continuously learn about the product. So this learning part about the product, I think that's the essence of testing. I mean, testing is all about like gathering information and learning. So with continuous testing, you can do it from start to the end. So that's something super. And one more thing is that before I did this course, I used to think that continuous testing is something which one does only during, like, the application is deployed and before it is released. So only in those phases I used to see that with each build you like test it out in a iterative manner. I don't know why I used to think like that, but now I got to know that it can even like start from this product backlog, where you test the story, you ask questions, or you basically, when the stories are in to do, even before like the developer starts working on it, you can actually prepare your test ideas and share and discuss ideas and all. So one thing is that you don't need to be in a full kind of a automation is not a blocker for you to do continuous testing. I mean, continuous testing and automation are two different things. And continuous testing talks about testing it continuously, and that's the more important essence which I wanted to talk about. So like in development, you talk test the early builds, or while reviewing like when the like stories are done, you identify regression issues, that everything else is working fine, and at the end you do the final check, which is the like more like a system testing, or more like when it's merged with the other branches. So you do some final checks, and then you do some testing in the production, and after it's released in the production, maybe you test it out in the monitoring phase, where like you review the logs for exception, or you monitor the performance issues, or you look for usage errors. So I mean, it's from the start to end, so like to the shift of the super left to the super right. So that's the essence about continuous testing. So Apurva, you wanted to add in something on this?
Yes, Rahul. So what I liked about continuous testing is the faster feedbacks that really help us to make a better product and ensure that the quality is intact for the product. And this, when I was doing this chapter, I could come up with an analogy. I don't know whether it fits for everyone, but I believe that the system, if you consider your body as a system, an entire system, and the different organs in your body as APIs, so the regular fitness or physical regime that you maintain, it is like continuous testing. It is like whenever you're putting your body to test every day, that is continuous testing, and it gives you faster feedbacks. Would be if you have any issues with any part of your body, you would be able to know that before. Matlab, it's like you come to know it earlier than what others would do, like non physical fitness people would do. So that's how I could relate continuous testing to, but it's not necessary that it's acceptable everywhere. But it sounded interesting to me, and that's an analogy that I could come up with. And I believe continuous testing would enable us to build better products at the end of the day.
Yes, absolutely. And uh, better products, and products about which we know better, and
Yes.
we plan them better. So yeah, and an interesting analogy. So nice. So let's go to the chapter number 2, which is the whole team approach to continuous testing. So you wanted to talk about this, Apurva?
Yes. So the whole team approach is basically where the whole team is involved in continuous testing. So usually what happens in our teams is that one person is dedicated to development, one person is dedicated to something testing. So it's like the whole responsibility lies on that person, and only that person is knowledgeable enough to take decisions or make any changes. So at times these things become bottlenecks and they become hurdle, because if that person is not available at certain time, you have to wait till that person gets back. So due to these bottlenecks, what we can do is, can you go down a little, Rahul?
Yes, yes.
So what Lissy talks about here is that the entire product, the delivery of a product is the whole team's responsibility. It's not the only one developer or one tester or one product owner who is responsible for a product, but the entire team is responsible for the product. So that's the reason we should involve everybody into the building of that product. So testing is also part of building that product. So everybody should be involved in every other aspects. That is what she talks about in this chapter. So could you go a little left? Yes. So how could we achieve that? Like we could coach testing to the entire team members by having pair discussions with the developer tester on test strategies, on test results, what we do as testers. So we have to educate them, we have to make them aware that what is involved in this testing. So that is basically what she talks about here, and she tells us how we can do this by having guidelines for testing, providing hints for testing that we could refer the Elizabeth Hendrickson cheat sheet for, and then we have then we could create mind maps talking about the different features, dependencies, etc. And then she gives us some tips that since testing is contextual and subjective, so we need to understand our team and the context and the environment, and then we should apply this whole team approach to testing. So there is this thing, who does automation in the team? So this is basically a question that is a universal question. Who does the automation? So it could be either the developer does the automation and the tester provides him the insights that how he could test, or the testers could do and the developers can focus on the implementation part. So that's about it, and we will talk about more detail about who does this automation in the next chapter.
Yeah, and Apurva, I wanted to talk on one very practical thing that happened with me in my work is that if you want to really have a whole team approach, this educating the team about testing, and when I say testing, I differentiate it from checking. So when, like in general, like when you talk to different stakeholders who are non-tester or who come from non-testing background, they most of the time associate testing to checking, and a lot of developers even write unit tests, so they think like testing is also an extension to that. But unit tests, like as we know, they are all just small fact checks. Basically, they are not testing. And another thing is that testing is a lot about mindset. Like testing talks about like what if this happens, or what if that happens. And so one thing that I tried, or I have tried with a lot of people who come from non-testing background is like, for example, maybe starting or pairing with them and going through the Elizabeth Hendrickson cheat sheet, which is a very popular cheat sheet, or explaining them about testing through mind maps. I mean, I showcase them features, I showcase them dependencies through mind maps, and I ask questions, and immediately I mention like these are some test ideas and all. So it creates a kind of an environment where like people are able to understand about it more. And one thing that helps when I explain it through mind maps is that they get a visual idea of what I am thinking, and that visual idea is some like mostly more than just about checking and all. So that's something which has worked for me. And yes, I mean, you give talks, you give like take hands-on sessions, and maybe even workshops. Workshops have helped me a lot, like to learn more about testing and help educate other people about testing. So because that's more on a practical side of testing, which you need to do. And who does automation? I mean, I also feel that, I mean, it should not be like restricted to one person, that only tester or only the automation tester, some designated person should do it. But like everybody should ramp up, and maybe they can even like do pairing sessions, developers are doing pairing session with us for learning testing or knowing more about testing, and we as a tester can do such pairing sessions with developer and learn more about that. So it's a kind of a mix. But yeah, I like this idea that like even developers can do this automation and all. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So let's go to the chapter number 3, which is how to tackle automation without an expert. So pretty standard problem in the industry. Like for example, say we don't have an automation expert, so how to tackle the automation now? And I was watching one video by Rahul Verma on Jugaadu Tester, where he talks about a lot of code which is written in this Jugaadu way, or Jugaadu means like a non-structured way, or just like in a way like in which it should not be written, where there are no standards and that is followed. So I mean, if there is no automation expert in your team, then how to tackle that? So first thing, like which Lisi also talked about, and which I also personally suggest, is that look for curated content. Look for content where you can get some kind of a roadmap or pathway for learning. For example, test automation universities, or like there are other YouTube channels or like courses on Udemy. So look for them. Uh, and one thing which has one way is to do the solo way, but that comes with challenges, because like in solo you generally don't like stay consistent. That was one reason why I even paired with Apurva, and I started pairing with a lot of people to complete things. So that's a drawback or side effect of solo. And another is like when we do hands-on exercise. So sometimes if we pair, like the extra perspective actually helps, and like you are able to complete things. And if you get stuck, you can ask somebody else who is also on the same boat. So that's awesome. And a non-solo way would be to attend courses, workshops, maybe tours, and testing tours, which is pretty interesting, where you go to different companies, and you like look for testing and like solutions and things, and you learn about them and how they do it. So that's awesome. And the only challenge is that to continue the learning that you get from all these courses or conferences or tours after the course, which is a very big challenge, because a lot of time like we attend something, we get inspired, but then we don't do it. And there is this learning and development model, like 70-20-10, which talks about like you can get some 10 or 20 up to 30% by just like listening to somebody or like just taking notes about that. But 70% learning actually happens when you actually do it, and when you practically write the code or do the thing. So that's something about it. And build a personal learning network, like Apurva, and there are a lot of friends like Himani, and I, Apurva and Himani did one more course. So build a personal network, learning network. So for like-minded people who are eager to learn and share, exchange, and it's awesome. Another thing is like if you want to start with this automation setup, so you like what I have seen is that most people just start with the automation setup. Like they don't think about all this, like why we want to do it and who will do it, or when it should be done, or how to manage it and everything. They just like start writing the code, which can get very disastrous and risky in long run. So there is one course by NG Jones which even I did, and which opened my perspective towards this automation setup, and there are a lot of considerations which we need to do. So I would recommend, like if anybody really wants to start, then they should do that course also. But ideally, like if you want to start, then you should think about like the framework to choose, and like look for tools which you are familiar with or the team is familiar with, and something which is easy to learn and adapt. There are tools which support like domain specific languages, so easy to pick up. Maybe you can try that if that suits your context. And then you have to like manage it in some repository. So maybe like it's a shared repository, or like however you want to do it, because at the end, like the team would be using it, and there would, like apart from you, a lot of people would be eventually getting like or using those tests or running those tests. So that's important. Then code review process, like automation is just development. A lot of people mistake automation as some like test automation, or like they don't understand that it's actually a development. The only difference is the purpose of doing development is different, which is maybe for writing the test or for speeding up some processes. But essentially the same rules of development applies here also, and you have to do a review process, and you have to write a clean code. And then there are test data setups, and how they should, like ideally it should be isolated and independent, so that you can scale them up, you can run it in parallelization and all those things. So similarly, like test infrastructure and environment. So these are important considerations. I mean, where the test is going to be run, because sometimes what happens is like some people develop the test on their machine, and when they run it on some other machine, like they don't actually work. So, and I mean, build pipeline, how are they going to integrate it, and what are the rules they are going to apply it, and maybe they want it to run like by manually triggering or by scheduled, so they have to consider it. And a good tip would be that like start including the automation related task in your day-to-day work instead of like putting it as a separate, totally separate out of the like totally in the backlog or something, like as a different. So keep tracking it in your with your day-to-day tasks, and maybe consider them as a part of your each story. So each story can have some effort for automation, that if we'll automate this, this is the time we'll allocate for it. So these are some things. Apurva, you want to add on something?
Yes, Rahul. I also feel that when you're learning something or doing something in a solo way, it becomes monotonous at some point, and it becomes boring also. So you divert from that track. Like prior to this, even I've started many courses, but what usually used to happen was after 3 or 4 chapters, I used to get bored, and I used to stick it up like, okay, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it day after tomorrow, and that tomorrow never came. So this really uh, getting together and working on things together really helps you to be on track. So that really has helped me. And this automation setup considerations, these are also very helpful, like setting up everything, the test data setups, test infrastructure and environment setups. All these are really helpful. And this was a super chapter for me as well.
So let's go to the chapter number 4, which talks about working solo.
This Here comes the chapter, working solo. So basically, all of us are working solo most of the time. But it is called the default working mode, where we are responsible for our work. But uh, but it is also considered like this is the way of working where we are considered to be busy, but our busy is not equal to being productive. So there are a lot of downsides to this working solo pattern. So let's get to that. So it involves a lot of stress because you are working on one thing and you believe that you're working on that thing only. And there is a long waiting for feedback. This is basically like you are the tester in your team and there's a developer in your team, and the developer gives you a module A to test. So there's been till that A module was developed, you weren't doing much of anything. And when you got the A module, you was working on it. Then the developer is working on the B module. So by the time you are ready with your feedback for A module, you already have the B module with you. So this turn this goes on in a loop where the you are left with a lot of work, compiling more stress that you have to do this also, you have to retest the bugs in B also and A also. So all these things are like it's creating a long feedback cycle. So that is dragging very slow, like your development process. So that is another downside for it, and poor handovers and lost knowledge silos also. So how do we counter these downsides? So we have to make proactive efforts to share knowledge in the team, give periodic demos to teach about your work. So teach about your testing to your developers and learn about development from your developers. Give lightning talks, give small challenges to other members in the team, do code reviews from your side. All these are the things that you could do, and it will really help you to shorten those feedback loops. So share knowledge with your team and also with the other teams in your company. It's not limited and restricted to your team only. Get to know the other modules and other teams as well, how they are doing it. So also you can form a testing community, reach out by reaching out to others, and communities help a lot. Trust me guys, they help a lot by acquiring knowledge, apply your knowledge, sharing your knowledge. All this by going to conferences, practice learning, blog about things that you learn from those conferences. So these are all the lessons that you could learn from all the communities, and they really like you. When you join a community, you know, like whenever you're stuck at something, you know whom to reach out to, who is a best person that you should ask this question to. And this really helps a lot in our daily lives at work. So meet periodically, learn about how others solve their challenges, and all these are the learnings that will help you to be better. So Rahul, you want to add some more things apart from this?
two important things which really touched me in this chapter were, one is that if we work solo, or if the whole team is working in some kind of a solo mode, which is the default mode in, I think, majority of the companies with which I have worked, or which I have even talked with my friends and other colleagues. One risk is that the lost knowledge silos. That's actually a big loss that happens, because a lot of time, like, people bring in a lot of experience on the table. They develop things, they develop solutions, keeping some vision in mind. But I have seen those visions getting lost when the members like left the team, or like somebody took the handover, because uh, it's practically impossible if, like, to hand over or to transfer some kind of knowledge which somebody has worked upon or built upon over years, and to just give it in some months. So that's a very big, I think, challenge for our industry. And another thing which really touched me is this form or join a testing community, because I was always a individual contributor in all my roles. And when I joined community, the first community I joined was the test chat, and I met a lot of like-minded people. And then I got to know about conferences and sessions, and a lot of activity around testing. I mean, and then I think I met you also in a community, the test tribe, where we were talking on some topic, and then we eventually discussed more about it and all. So that's actually helpful, because you get a lot of people who bring in the same perspective, and they can really help you out. And there are no foundations, so I mean, you can just talk and ask freely about testing, and you can talk about your challenges without getting judged. So that's something really nice. So yeah, so that's something I wanted to talk about, this working solo. And the next
That
chapter
really
is,
helps a lot.
yes, yeah, it you pointed out very correctly. It helps a lot, and it even keeps you positive, and you have a assurance and a confidence that okay, I can do it. I mean, I know people who have done it, and I mean, they can help me. And sometimes, I mean, just a moral push also works. I mean, it can do wonders. So yeah, that's something nice. And chapter 5 is something which I personally love doing, and I do it a lot of times. That is pairing up. And I can talk about this chapter for like the whole day, but like the benefits of pairing up and how it has benefited me. I pair with a lot of people on a lot of things. And I mean, one way, a lot of people ask me that how do you remember all these resources for knowledge and various things? So that's actually because I share. Because whenever I look at something, and I think of, like, who works on this, or who like would also get benefited from this, and then I immediately share it with them. So it has helped me in like in a lot of ways, even in my networking skills or socializing with others. And whatever, like, Lisi talked about in this chapter, I could totally relate. And like, you can reduce your knowledge silos by sharing the knowledge and skills and expertise. And one benefit that a partner helps me is in like staying disciplined, because I like try to start things and then go and do something else. But I think seeing your partner doing it, and then they ask you questions, and then you feel, oh, they have done till this chapter, now let me also start and doing it till then. So that really helps. It even broadens your thinking. I mean, because a lot of times when you do it alone, you do it with one mindset. But when you talk with somebody else, like when I talk with you, and you were telling me after chapter 1, and you were telling me about this exercise thing, and how you see it, and that actually opened me to a lot more ideas about it. So, and it also helps new members onboard quickly. And this is a very, I think, very amazing strategy to onboard new members. Like, rather than giving them some materials to read, just like pair with them and do some things together. I mean, and like at a mid-entry level, like, these things really work, and I mean, they are able to catch it up and all these things. So, and it's a bi-directional learning, so it's awesome. Yeah, you learn, and the other person also learns, and it's a two-way amazing thing. And there are different styles of pairing which I was not aware about. That there are different, like, there are formal names for such pairings, like traditional style and strong style, formal, informal, local, remote, and all. But like I think here they talked about two very popular style. One is the traditional way which we do, and I think which right like we are doing right now. That one has the keyboard and they find a way and does implementation. Another person like observes it and they review it and they take notes. So sometimes like when we were working on one test strategy, so I was doing the same, right? I was like taking note, like using the keyboard, and then you were doing some reviews and observing what I was doing, and maybe you were also having your own notes. So the only downside which I see is that the member two who is just observing, they may get disengaged. So it needs a lot of patience from the second member, and I think that sometimes comes with maturity, this patience, and but it's awesome. I mean, it's nice. Next is strong style pairing, and as the name suggests, like strong style, I really feel it's very strong, and you have to have a strong roots and basics. The this instructor needs to be very strong with its basics and with the command to drive the driver. So I have done this strong style pairing with Ajay, where like Ajay like gives me steps and which are so clear, even like through just his voice, like he can just direct me what I have to do, and I don't get confused. So that's really amazing, where you take care of the implementation as a driver, and somebody gives you the uh, steps. And the downside is that it takes experience to find how to guide the other person, that what you want to say just by voice, because you cannot actually point your finger, or you cannot like basically do it by yourself and show them how it's done. So you'll have to manage everything by voice. But the benefit is that this driver, the person who's doing it, they learn very quickly from the instructions and by picking up the details, and it actually helps them to like even do things quickly by just reading documentations or by just listening to some things. So it's an amazing thing. I mean, and tip is rotate frequently, which we have done. I mean, we have rotated a lot of times, like where you were writing and I was not, and vice versa. Combine skills and knowledge to benefit yourself as well as the others, yes, and create a safe environment for pairing. I think this safe environment is very important, otherwise like people will not feel comfortable to pair. So it's okay to fail, and I think that there should be this mutual understanding between both the people, that it's absolutely fine if I fail and if it doesn't work out, and we can take it, and I won't be judged or it won't go really bad. So this safe environment is, I think, one of the most important tip, because at the end, I mean, every problem is people's problem, and yeah. So you want to add in, Aparna?
I want to add in our experiences, that when we were pair learning, how it went. So at times I would say I was not feeling well, or I was down with something. Then Rahul would push me like, okay, come on, this, we could do this, we could do that. Acha, you're not, you don't want to do this? Okay, let's do something else. So that really, like having a partner really motivates you to do things and learn things. It's not only about one topic that you could learn. You could learn about 10 different topics when you have a partner with you. So it's not necessarily that you have picked up something, so you have to learn about only that, and then if not that, you are not collaborating. So it's on a lot of things. You could collaborate on a lot of things. So it doesn't have to be monotonous. It doesn't feel bored. It doesn't feel boring, and it keeps you motivated, and it's a healthy way of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Healthy. Healthy is, I think, the right keyword for it. Yeah, it's very healthy and organic. Yeah. So let's go to chapter number 6, which is something we have recently tried also. So yeah.
So the mob approach. This is also one thing that we have tried recently. We'll come up with a video very soon. So what is mob learning? This is where we get together and learn. Like it's more than two people. The previous chapter was pairing up with two people. It's more than two people. So what is mob programming? Rahul, could you shift a little left? I mean, right?
Little right. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Still a bit more. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So mob program is basically all the people working together for the same thing, same time, same space, same computer. This often used to happen in my previous projects. Like when we would come across certain challenge, what we would do is there would be a lead and he would be sitting at his system and we all used to gather up around him and we used to brainstorm ideas how do we do this, how do we come to a solution to this. So this at times is really helpful. Like too many brains are working there on the same thing. So you never know who could come up with a better idea and that could work. So we could also do mob testing, mob code review, mob thinking, mob everything. So we have done mob learning and we'll share our experience on that pretty soon. So various roles inside a mob, there is a driver, there is a navigator, providing suggestions, researching, taking notes. So these are all the various things everybody could do. The driver would drive that mob session. The navigator will navigate and take you to things. What are the different things that needs to be done? And all others could research things and come up with ideas or solutions. So this really is like in a shorter span of time, there are too many brains thinking on the same thing. So we could come up with very good ideas and we could solve the problem really quick.
Yeah.
So next, Lissy talks about the things that we can know that we are at the right place if we are sharing and learning. So this is very important being in a mob that you share whatever you learn and you learn whatever you are sharing. So this happened with us when we were mob learning. We used to, apart from the course that we were doing and learning, we used to share things that whatever we came across. So that really helps. And if you have two ideas for a solution for problem solving a problem, then you could try both of them and decide that what works best for you. So apply the yes and rule of improvisational theater. This is the rule that this talks about that you cannot destroy someone ideas. So be kind, be respectable, be considerate, whatever might be the solution that they come up with, you go with the yes and then whatever is however it works. So this really helps to maintain that balance in the mob because there are too many people that might create some disturbances. But if you are applying this approach, the yes and this rule, and you are being kind and considerate, there'll be no issues in the team, and this will help the team to stay together. So what are the benefits of mobbing? It is effective, it keeps you unblocked, no context switch, so everybody is working on the same context. So more thoughtful solutions because too many people are there to think about the same solution. So no need for sync up meetings. Yeah, this is one point that I really like that you don't have to sync up. So everybody is doing the same thing. So we don't need to give an update like, okay, what are you working on? What are you working on? This is my status. This I have worked on this today. So there's nothing of that sort. So we don't need any sync ups because we know who is doing what and who is thinking about what. So it gets the best out of everybody. No power dynamics and related to pressure. So there's no pressure really that you have to be in this way. So I really like this idea of mob approach, and I believe even we have worked in certain situations having the mob approach. So this is a pretty cool thing, and you could get together, you could have lunch there, you can have everything at your whoever the driver is at their desk, and it's super fun to work together like that. And it really so the best part that I like about this is you can come up to conclusions quicker than what it would happen if you would taken it individually. So that's I think so. Rahul, have you ever worked in a mob?
I have worked in a mob, and I actually love working in this mob and pair approach. And the amount of learning, or in my context, if I say the amount of domain knowledge or the depth of software which I have got whenever I did mobbing, that was immense. I mean, I would have practically never got so much insights if I would have done those things alone. It's actually fun. And a lot of times when we get stuck, I think this mob approach is something which like naturally comes into place. Another thing that which I really liked about this chapter is this yes and talking like this as an improvisational theater, because a lot of time if somebody else gives us the suggestion, we say that okay, but and then we say that why it won't work, or maybe why it's not the best idea and all. And this but actually is very destructive, or can get very destructive, because the other person might get a feeling that they only want to do or he or she only wants to do what they have in their mind. So if their point is correct, or if their point has a substance, you can always say that yes, this is correct, and we can also try this, or in the interest of time we have to try something, and the message becomes a lot more clear, it gets really easy and easy to digest and easy to manage, uh, because a lot of times I have seen that unconsciously walls and barriers get created in between people because of some kind of communication. Either it could be lack of communication or miscommunication, or I mean like that. So this improvisational theater style, I really liked it, and there are no power dynamics when you work in a mob. I mean, it feels like how one feels when they are like playing like a kid, and it's joy, and it's awesome. So that's awesome. And the last part, the super part, it's all about context, and it's amazing. I mean, context is the king, queen, and everything. I mean, context is everything, and uh, there is no one way. I mean, there is no one way that a mob is best or the peer learning is best. Uh, it may be best for me. I mean, peer learning, I like doing it, but it might not work for the other person or somebody else. So context is the king, and you need to run experiments to know what works for you, and some like generally like whatever you like aligns with you, you'll immediately like, and you'll get that benefit and vibe and things. And experimenting is important. I mean, even if you fail, and that's absolutely fine. And it's all about people. I mean, change takes time. I mean, change actually like doesn't happen overnight, and no matter how they say it, it's always a people's problem, and we have to at the end understand that. And no matter how they are saying it, it's always a people's problem. So uh, understand that it's people, and maybe start with one thing at a time. I mean, I have seen a lot of people getting frustrated in testing and in a lot of fields, because they want some things which they feel are right, and they want them to come and be applied overnight. I mean, immediately, like a switch, and I want all these practices here. But it doesn't actually happen in the real world. I mean, we live in a world where like there are people, and they cannot change overnight, and you cannot actually change things overnight. So you have to take time and give time, and start with one thing at a time, maybe minor thing, and get the feedback, involve everybody. And I think that's the only way of changing. I mean, even if like and it's very nice that Elizabeth has put this point, because a lot of people, like after doing a course, they'll want to feel that just like I want to go to my team or to my project or wherever I'm working, and I want to change it overnight, and that could be a really backfire, or a reverse effect of this. So things, I mean, that can also help, and I see all these as some heuristics for solving problems, and they can be fallible, but they are nice. I mean, use BDD, or create shared understandings early on. So have conversations before implementation, because a lot of time what I have seen is that things get deployed for testing, and within the first hour, like tester can tell that okay, why this is not working, then it again goes back for re-implementation and redesign. So all those cycles can be saved if like you have early conversations, and you talk about this, and maybe you can implement zero defect tolerance, that will fix everything or something like that. But I think it depends a lot on the project and the context. So definitely, I mean, the topic is again, it's all about context. So, and I mean, if you implement this, I mean, there is the benefit of implementing this zero defect tolerance is that the backlog is free and not ever increasing, and it reduces waste and frees up team to focus on what's valuable. So maybe you even start discarding things that we don't want to fix. I mean, it could be a business decision. So that could also be a outcome of this zero defect tolerance. And grow full stack, maybe a cross-functional team or T-shaped team. What I understand from this cross-functional team is that develop a flavor for other things also. I mean, be multi-skilled, or I mean, that's what I understand. I don't know what's this T-shaped team much, but I think cross-functional is having multi-skills and understanding automation and testing and development and a lot of things. So maybe try growing full stack. I don't know if what is full stack, but maybe learning about other stacks or having a knowledge of other things also maybe. So visit on-site, which is very important. On-site, maybe with the team and also with your customers. So that's something which actually helps, and you get to know as a tester that what they want and what are their real problems which we have to actually solve or help them with. So that's nice. Collaborate closely, yes. So maybe collaborate with them also, involve them also, and get benefited. So yeah, that's something I wanted to talk about. So Apurva, you wanted to add in something? This is the last chapter.
Yes, Rahul, I believe this chapter was the perfect closure that this course could have. So it at the end, it's all about context. So testing is all about context. It is contextual. It is subjective. Like various approaches are suitable for various products. So it's like that. So even here, when we are talking about this entire course, it is all contextual. It might apply. You can apply it. You cannot apply it. It all depends on the context and the environment that you're working on and the team that is involved. So all these things are the small factors that you should consider before applying any approach to any team.
So I think we are done finally with this first debriefing, kind of a debriefing of this course, what we learned about it, and we wanted to talk about it because it was really nice and first experience about us doing pair learning. So thank you for watching this. Guru, you want to add in some closing remarks?
Yes, I recommend everyone to pair up with someone and do something because it opens new doors and new ideas in your brain. Like you could think of the possibilities that you could have never thought of. So that really helps you. So just pair up or try the mock approach. At least you could give it a try if it works for you. But I'm telling you, it will definitely work because it's worked for a lot of people whom I have recommended this to. So it keeps you motivated and keeps you to go on every day and do something different and make a difference. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share on this. And yeah, I would say we would continue to learn and bring you some different other courses and other things as well. So stay tuned.
Yeah, thank you. And always remember, I mean, in the end, it's all about context. So
Yes.
this is the lesson that we take from this course. Yeah, very important. So thank you, Apurva. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Rahul, for pairing up with me. Yeah, bye-bye.
It was a pleasure.